If you are just getting into candle making, you might quickly realize that you're going to have to do something that you never thought you might have to do when you decided to start making candles. Or at least maybe something you just flat out don't like doing, and that is math. Personally, I've always liked math. It's always been my favorite. But if it's not your favorite, or you're just looking for a little bit of guidance when it comes to making candles and dealing with this candle math, then I hope this video helps. Welcome to the channel. My name is Wade, and I'm going to break today's video down into 3 simple lessons, and a quick big shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. All right, let's get into it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And as you notice, I titled this Candle Math Lesson, Make It Easy, Make It Work, and I did that for a reason. I do want it to be easy. We want it to be something that's repeatable and that's not taking a ton of brain power. This should be something that, it becomes like back of our hand, second nature to us. And so we want it to be simple, but at the same time, it also needs to be right. We want it to make it work, not just for us now, but if we were to scale up in production, we want it to still be helpful and useful as we grow. So let's start off with lesson 1. In lesson 1, we're going to talk about the difference between volume versus weight. A lot of people think that this isn't really a huge deal. You can really work with any measurement that you want, and that is technically true. However, in candle making, there is a few things to consider, and that is what we're going to look at real briefly here in lesson 1. First of all, let's start with volume. With volume, we are talking about fluid ounces, milliliters, gallons, things like that. So a lot of your materials might be sold in volume measurements. For example, some companies do sell their fragrance oils by fluid ounces, like Nature's Garden, for example, but there are several others. And they do that because in other handcrafts, soap making, making lotions, and there are other handcrafts that do use a volume measurement quite frequently. And as you see here, I mentioned that it is common in handcrafting, but it is a little less preferred when it comes to candle making. So let's talk about that now as we evaluate the weight side. So when we talk about weight, we're talking about ounces, grams, pounds. And that is the distinction between volume and weight. Now, the one thing I want to point out real quickly is that a lot of people, especially new candle makers, will frequently confuse fluid ounces and ounces. They are not the same thing. Fluid ounces is volume and ounces is weight. Most materials for candle making will already be packaged by weight, which is an advantage of using weight from the get-go. Wax is going to arrive by weight. You're going to purchase most of your other materials, including fragrance oils and other additives, by weight, although there are exceptions to that, as I previously mentioned. But it's also the preferred way of measuring your materials when it comes to candle making. And that is because most materials not only are packed for candle making, but they are recommended for use by weight as well. So a lot of candle making waxes will have a max fragrance load that they can hold. For example, many waxes can hold up to 10% of fragrance oil, and that is by weight, not by volume. So you see a lot of candle making information and materials are all based around weight. So it is the ideal unit and measurement to be using when you are making candles. So you can see that that is why I give weight the green check mark. It's not to say that you can't use volume, but it is just recommended against, and most making candles do use weight in this craft. So now that we know that, and going forward, we're going to be thinking in terms of weight. So I wanted to get that out of the way first. That is really the foundation to this next lesson, is knowing that we're working in weight. So lesson 2 is about fragrance and wax and how much to use of each. This is a very common question, especially for new candle makers, one that I get directly myself quite a bit, but I also get this question a lot in comments here on the channel, as well as on Instagram posts and the Facebook group as well. And that is, how much fragrance do I need to add to my wax? How much total wax and fragrance do I need to make a candle? How do I come up with those numbers anyways? So even if I know how much I'm supposed to add, what is the formula? Like, what's the way I can do this myself? So that's what we're going to talk about here in lesson 2. So there are 2 options when it comes to deciding how much fragrance to wax ratio you need to make your candle. Now, we're not going to be talking about anything else that goes in your candles like dye and your wicks or anything. That's a whole different topic. This lesson is specific to how much fragrance and wax. As you see here, method 1 is just wax plus fragrance oil. This is kind of your traditional method of figuring out how much fragrance oil to add to your wax. In this method, you know how much wax you're going to use, and you use a formula to decide how much fragrance oil you can add to it. So let's walk through this example. Step 1 would be to measure your wax. For example, let's say we want to use 16 ounces of wax. So we will start off with that measurement. Step 2 is fragrance oil. How much fragrance oil do we want to use in our candles? Now, again, this could be a different topic on its own, but most waxes will tell you how much fragrance oil you can use, as I previously mentioned, but you also, as a candle maker, can decide, as long as you don't go above that max that the wax can hold, what percentage of fragrance oil you want to use. Very common ranges are usually somewhere between 6% up to 10 or even 12%. However, the most common is usually 8, 9, or 10% these days. So as an example, I'm going to say we're going to use a 9% fragrance oil load. So you have to know that before we go into step 3. Step 3 is now adding our fragrance oil formula to this mix. So if we know we want 16 ounces of wax and we want a 9% fragrance load, we just take 16 times 0.09. And that gives us 1.44 ounces of fragrance oil. So we know how much wax and how much fragrance oil. Wax, we need 16 ounces, and fragrance oil, we can use 1.44 ounces to have a 9% fragrance load. That gives us a total amount of wax and fragrance, a total fill of 17.44 ounces. So an advantage of this method is it's very simple and it's obviously very accurate. I mean, it is math, so it is going to be accurate. And all we're simply doing in this method is we know how much wax we have, how much oil can we add to it, or do we want to add to it? That's really the point of this method. And as I mentioned, this is the typical approach that most candle makers will start with. However, there is a drawback, and that is that it doesn't actually equal the correct candle size for you. So you're the one that's saying, I need this much wax, or I have this much wax, how much oil can I add to it? But as you can see, that gave you a total fill of 17.44 ounces. Well, what if you don't need 17.44 ounces? Well, then you have to do some additional math to kind of back that out. What if you only need a 16-ounce candle? Well, now you've got too much. This method gets you right numbers, but not necessarily the right numbers to make a candle the size that you're looking for. So hopefully that makes sense. And that is what's going to lead us into method number 2, and that is called the total fill method. Step 1 in total fill is determining the total amount that we actually need. So I just left off talking about method 1, how that doesn't give you that. So in this method, we start with that information. So if I know I need a 16 ounces total, that is step 1, is determining the total amount we need. Step 2 then is to figure out, again, what our fragrance oil percentage is, which we're going to use the same example here. So we'll say 9%. And then step 3 is the wax formula. In this case, it's a little different. So we're going to take 16, which is the total amount of the fill that we need, divided by 1 plus the percentage of fragrance oil. So 16 divided by 1.09. If that fragrance oil percentage was 8%, it would be 16 divided by 1.08. 7%, 1.07, and so on. That formula of 16 divided by 1.09 gives you 14.68. 14.68 is the amount of wax in this case. And then the formula to figure out the fragrance oil is just subtraction. You take your original total fill of 16 minus the 14.68, and you get 1.32, which is your fragrance oil. So once again, the wax amount would be 14.68. You could round to 14.7. And fragrance oil would be 1.32, and you could round that to 1.3. And as you noticed, we are working in ounces in this example, but it would be the same if you're working in grams or any other measurement. What is the advantage of this method? Well, it gives you the exact amount that you need to fill your candle. If you have a container that you know will hold 16 ounces by weight, like that's the size of the candle, the finished product that you need, then this formula is perfect because it helps you determine how much wax and how much fragrance oil you need to get that complete fill amount. And that is why this method is my preferred method. This is also the method that most candle makers will eventually adapt over time, especially as you scale and grow, because it allows you to make the amount of fill for your specific batches exactly. Now, I know method 2 might seem a little bit more daunting at first glance, but remember back on method 1, the formula gave you a result that doesn't match the actual amount you need. So you would either have to do additional math to backtrack it and tweak it and adjust it to get the amount you actually need, or you end up with some waste. So method 2 might seem a little bit more confusing, but it's actually very simple and you get quite used to it, and it's very repeatable and scalable. So no matter if you're making 1 candle, 8 candles, 100 candles, this is a formula that will work for any batch size. So it minimizes waste and it gives you the exact amount of fill that you would need. We'll go into another example here in just a minute and show you an example if you were to make a batch of candles rather than one single candle. But first, we're going to do a pop quiz. So some of you that are very new to candle making might be confused on the two methods that we just looked at briefly. And you might be thinking, well, if they're both 16-ounce candles, why did we end up with different amounts of fragrance oil? And so I wanted to touch on that. I think many of you probably completely understand this, but I want to highlight it a little bit more just to make it very clear, and also why I prefer one of these methods much more over the other. Let's take a quick look at both these methods again to remind ourselves what we're looking at. The top line of these, we both start with 16 ounces. Method 1, we started with 16 ounces of wax. In method 2, we started with 16 ounces of fill. So what exactly is the difference? Well, in method 1, as I mentioned before, we're actually working with a totally different size candle, a totally different amount of finished product. In method 1, we're actually dealing with 17.44 ounces of finished product, whereas in method 2, we're actually only dealing with 16 ounces. So the difference is how we started the formula, is we started with the total finished product in method 2, versus in method 1, we just started with the wax and then we added the fragrance to it. So hopefully this quick check makes a lot of sense. But if not, there's one more quick example that we're going to do now where we go into an actual batch of candles to help paint this picture a little more clearly. So in this example, we're going to imagine we're making 8 candles. Each candle is a 10-ounce candle, meaning total fill of 10 ounces per candle. And we're going to assume a fragrance oil percentage of 10%. So the total fill we need is 8 candles times 10 ounces each equals 80 ounces. We need a total of 80 ounces of combination wax and fragrance oil. So our wax formula in this case for this entire batch of candles is 80 divided by 1.10. And again, 1.10, the 10 is the percentage of fragrance oil. Again, if this was a 9% fragrance oil, it would be 80 divided by 1.09. If it was 12%, it would be 80 divided by 1.12. And that gives us 72.7 ounces of wax to make this batch of 8 candles, which means our fragrance oil is 80 minus 72.7, which gives us 7.3 ounces of fragrance oil to make this batch of 8 candles. As you can see, the 72.7 of wax and the 7.3 of ounces of fragrance oil add up to exactly 80 ounces of finished product. And that 80 ounces is exactly what we needed to make 8 10-ounce candles. As you can see, this works for any batch size, 1 candle, multiple candles, and there's no or minimal waste, as we've talked about. Now, one tip I would give you if you're curious at this point, well, how do I know how much wax or total finished product I need to begin with? That's quite simple. So my tip is to take your jar that you're going to make your candle in and just weigh it while it's empty. Then fill the jar with your wax. You don't even have to make a finished candle. It doesn't have to be a right candle that actually performs well. Just fill it with your wax. Weigh the filled jar, then just subtract the difference. That difference is the fill amount. That is the total amount you need. So if you weigh your empty jar, and let's say your empty jar weighs 12 ounces, and then you weigh the filled jar and it's 22 ounces, well, your filled jar minus your empty jar leaves you with 10 ounces. And that is how much wax product, finished product, is actually in your candle. Now, before we continue to the next lesson, a big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes and members, a great place to learn new skills and get inspired, whether that's candle making, another craft, or help with your business. One of my least favorite things personally about running a candle business is managing the social media. I just don't enjoy it all that much, but I also just struggle with the time to do it. So being able to make good looking content and post, but also do it in a timely manner is very important to me. So I decided to take a course on Skillshare about social media creation, and I thought I would pair it with a software that I already use called Canva. So I am currently taking a Skillshare class called Social Media Content Creation in Canva, from Beginner to Advanced by Maggie Stera. Just scrolling through it, I noticed tips on using Canva for beginners, which I'm fairly comfortable with, but it also dives into specifically making social media content posts with Canva, how to use Canva for your business, and it goes into a lot more detail and some advanced things that I don't currently utilize, so I thought it might be helpful. But there is so much more to tap into when it comes to Skillshare. I've taken many other classes. Skillshare is a great assortment of classes for handcrafters, business classes, marketing classes, learning how to take better product photos, create and run your website, even productivity and self-growth. They have something for everyone. Now, Skillshare is a tremendous deal anytime, but the best part is right now you can have completely unvetted access to Skillshare for 1 month completely free to try it. See what you think, take some classes, and go from there. I will have a link to Skillshare in the description below, and the first 1,000 people to click that link will get 1 month completely free trial of Skillshare. All right, now back to the video. I hope so far in these first 2 lessons you've understand the importance of using weight when it comes to making candles, but also the 2 different methods, the 2 different common methods that exist for how to measure the materials you need, and why I strongly recommend method 2, total fill. But we have one more lesson left, and that is about labeling. Now I know what you're thinking. What the heck does labeling have to do with math, and why is it part of this video? Well, that's what we're going to talk about now. The reason we're talking about labeling is to discuss the difference between weight versus net weight. What we're talking about here is labeling standards, labeling practices. For example, when you sell a candle that is a 10-ounce candle, that 10-ounce candle needs to be the finished product inside. So think back to method 2 of how we were using the formula to come up with the total amount of fill that we need. That's the amount that should be on your label or your packaging. That's the amount we talk about when we're discussing net weight versus weight, which is really just the total weight of your whole product, the jar, the lid, everything put together. Net weight is your total weight minus the jar weight. So it's what's inside your container. And again, as a refresher, one simple tip to figure out what your net weight is you weigh the empty jar, then you weigh your finished or filled jar, and then simply subtract the difference. Again, the reason we're discussing this is that you want to use your net weight on your products and packaging, not your total weight. There are actually labeling guidelines that dictate what should be on a product, and it's the net fill weight or net weight, not the total weight, at least here in the United States. Now, this isn't exclusive to only candles. You'll see other products on the shelf when you go to the grocery store that talk about net weight, and that is the product weight inside the bag, not including the packaging of the boxes or the jars that they come in as well. So just keep that in mind when you are labeling your products. And this is whether it's your product labels or maybe this is on your packaging. Wherever you're listing your weight, be sure to be listing your net weight, not the total weight. And then one final tip is to make sure you're listing that net weight in both ounces and grams. An example is a net weight of 9 ounces / 255 grams. This is just something that's pretty standard across most industries, and you'll see this on most packaging and labels if you're visiting the store yourself. The idea here is not to be complicated. You want to keep it simple, but you also want to do it right. And I hope today's video helps you accomplish that and gives you some guidance. If you have any specific questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. But I also encourage you to sign up for my resource newsletter for candle makers. We have been taking signups now for a couple of months, but we haven't really started the newsletter yet, or at least at the time of recording this video. But content is going to be coming soon, including a candle math cheat sheet that will take a lot of what we talked about today and put it on a cheat sheet for you. So in the description below this video, I will have a link to that newsletter. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for stopping by as always. If you did enjoy it at all, give this video a thumbs up and a like. That really does help me and helps this channel. If you're not already a subscriber, be sure to subscribe to the channel as well, because we have a lot of other candle making and candle business content coming in the future, as well as a lot more already posted. Once again, thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, and don't forget to click the link in the description below to start your free trial. The first 1,000 people to click that link will get Skillshare completely free, full access for 1 month. Thank you all for being here, and I'll see you all next time.